So I want to give you just a quick briefing about our presenters tonight. And the reason that I'm doing a really quick briefing is that I want you to go to part 1, and that's where their full bios are, and watch part 1 if you missed it. So Jimmie Holman he's the CEO of Pulse Technologies Research in Dallas. And he's been involved since 1969 in proprietary research and development in many areas of highly technical design, covering a huge arena like signal intelligence, electronic, surveillance, exotic signal processing, and now he's dedicated his life to extensively researching resonant frequency technology since 1995 with his intense, and believe me, it's intense, focus on the positive effects and natural responses of a biological nature for personal, environmental, medical, commercial, and industrial application. And even though he does live in Dallas, Texas, most of his proprietary research is carried out pretty specifically in Eastern Europe. So we're really thrilled to have you back, Jimmie. And
thank you.
Yeah, and welcome. And Jordan's brilliant. Jordan is a Pulse technology consultant and user and trainer of the Zyto Elite system, and he works out of the Bourne Clinic in Grand Rapids. And he's been working with Jimmie and developing libraries and developing protocols and just really getting into some extremely advanced work. So if you want to hear his whole bio, guess where you got to go? To part 1. Okay. So welcome, Jordan. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, to segue here from part 1 into part 2, Jordan, before we move to Jimmie's presentation, I would like to ask you a couple of questions that I think are really important so that we can kind of like get people all on the same page. Okay? So the first one, are frequencies a diagnosis?
They aren't yet, but they seem to coincide with a lot of diagnosis. This stuff is converted usually to binary signatures and then assessed with galvanic skin responses, and they seem to line up pretty well. But yeah, right now they're not particularly. But it's a long answer to that one.
Okay, but I think that's a perfect answer. They correlate, but they of themselves are not a diagnosis. Is that what you said?
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. So why use biofeedback to find rife frequencies?
There's a continuing varying processes in the body based on what people are exposed to, what people have eliminated through different detox methods, and even if a condition is the same condition, the frequencies of it will usually respond in different ways, different parts of the month, or there's different variables, and it seems like people fall out of tune and continually mutate, and this is known with people that do biofeedback, that the conditions do change.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, we do fall out of tune, very much so, with all our stressors. Where do frequencies originate?
There's different methods for finding frequencies. The ones that Jimmie uses seem to be, fantastic, the best that I've seen. There's been public lists of frequencies, and people like Robert O'Becker have done works with currents of injury, which are measured currents from healing wounds that can then be reapplied to non-healing wounds, and then you can see healing and in fact take place.
Okay. So my last question is, have the frequencies been proven to do anything?
Yes. Sometimes it's private. It's usually and they've lab verified stuff, since 1929 with Rife, and Jimmie was the first person that I saw do work and put out a paper in 2009, which on Candida devitalization, which is what made me purchase his equipment in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because there's a lot of equipment out there, but no one's putting out research and work like these guys were, and they do seem to stand ahead of everyone else in that department.
I got it. I can hear that one. Okay. So our listeners are now ready to get into part 2. So thank you, Jordan, for those great answers. And Jimmie, I turn it over to you.
Okay, let's go to the next slide. This is just a quick reminder that this isn't conventional. It's only alternative. Next slide. If y'all recall, almost everything we talk about is involved with Rife, Tesla, and Galvani. The first video was largely about that. I'd recommend going back and looking at that if you missed it. Let's go to the next one. We talked about the various mechanisms. Most of the people have only thought of the destructive mechanism, but when it comes to the electronic modalities, there are many other aspects where it really shines. If you only think of it in the destructive, you're missing out on about 98%. The pH was another. The enhanced nutrient and drug delivery, which is actually called electroporation. The enhanced cellular voltage and energy. And all of this actually ties in to the way the blood and everything reacts. And it's not just the blood, it's the organs, everything. Next slide. In the equipment that we particularly use, this is a different stuff from the quantum life stuff. It's just a different scale, but it involves a lot more hardware, but in many ways is doing many of the same things, just at a different scale. And next question. I'm sorry, next slide. Yeah,
I got it.
I'm not all here today. It was a long night. The equipment that we just showed is really not much of any use at all by itself. The guidance that you get, the understanding that you have about your own body, the mechanisms, and the guidance by the practitioner is really what is needed. And that is the reason we have people like Jordy. As a manufacturer, our equipment is worthless until it comes to getting put in the hands of good people that know what to do, know how to work with people, recognize what's going on. And that recognition of what's going on is when the devices like the Quantum Life or the Zyto or many of the other devices out there that can run from 1,000 on up to 20, 30,000. And I'm not sure that the 30,000 devices are any better than the lesser devices. In many ways, they work the same way. Some of them have a little bit better marketing than others. But anyway, I'm going to turn most of this program over to Jordy tonight because this actually gets into the actual application, and all these applications are not what we do. These are what we work with the practitioners to do. So, Jordy, why don't you take it from here?
Okay. Do you want me to talk a little bit about this slide, or we go right to the next one?
Anything you want to do.
Okay, well, this is showing a no-sode list, which are homeopathic variables for different microorganisms, and that's fine. But that can be used as a guidance tool. Like there's about 500 of those in the system that I use. But then I go to frequencies lists that are categorized with those specific microorganisms, and there might be 30 different frequencies that work with that microorganism. And what I was saying before is that the microorganism usually can be found, the same one over and over again, but it's lying at a different frequency rate. And so just having one binary code signature for the organism isn't good enough to find it over and over again. But what I do is I'll scan people for those different microbes or vitamins, and primarily frequencies, and then I build programs for people to run at home with the PFG, as you see here, with the pads just hooked up to a part of the body, leaving the hands free to do work or relax or whatever it is. So it's not putting a cramp on anyone's schedule. Next slide. Next slide. Next, please. There's Candida. Yeah, next. Different forms of it. Different biofilm pictures. Next slide. Yeah, it can be identified with oral thrush or spit test. It's one of the most common microorganisms, and people talk about Lyme co-infections, and almost everyone that has Lyme seems to have Candida, and then if they have both, usually floodgates are open to quite a few different ones from immune system destruction. But many of people's conditions of fatigue or brain fog or it can be in muscles, a lot of things. So it's so important that they did work to show the devitalization of this. Next slide, please.
That's actually
There's pictures of
program when we did it.
Yeah. So this is back in 2009 with their equipment that they had back then, and the equipment now is more powerful. Candida is something that's done a lot on blood work at the place that I work, and someone had kept track of all their records, their nystatin prescriptions, plus diet that they did over a month, and noticed more devitalization from one Candida protocol being run than the nystatin and the diet combined for a month period of time. So usually the cost of some of these drugs that are meant to target the same things justify the cost of these devices when you can see them working in the blood work. So yeah, we'll continue to go on to the next slide. Most of the frequencies are quite high, right around 50,000 hertz. And they have listed numbers from mediocre success of remediation to excellent destruction of the organism colonies. Next slide. And all the Candida can be found in depth at the pulsetechresearch.com. And then they have the energetic human, and section 3 is where a lot of these protocols you can go further in depth into. They have arthritis, and all these are built into the private libraries of the PFG lab and are very quick to access. It's a few clicks away, and you've got something that can target both inflammation, which is usually the main thing that people think about with arthritis, and they take something like turmeric for it. But there's pathogens, sometimes parasites and bacteria, and this targets the varying aspects of arthritis instead of focusing on one or the other. Next slide. The rheumatoid arthritis, that was the parasites. The osteo, I think, is more bacteria.
I think that's on the next line.
Okay.
Better.
Yeah, these are conventional treatments for these things, which all every medication has a side effect, and you're minimizing that when you're using it. Cause is not addressed. That's very true. And usually operations are done, in this case. So, next slide, please. Bacterial cause, osteoarthritis, rheumatoid, parasitic cause, and then there's arthritic inducing inflammation through that, which is modifiable through diet. The other two targeted through frequencies. So we'll go to the next one. And the arthritis protocol seems to work very well at usually with the people with Lyme have these different co-infections, many of which are in this protocol. And it works fantastic by itself, usually without much biofeedback until the condition of the arthritis has changed, or maybe the frequencies have shifted slightly from the norm. And there's different things that can be used. You could modify the frequencies with specific supplements. This cream, I believe, goes in between the pad and the person for electronic delivery of the substance, if that makes sense. We'll go to the next slide. Next slide. This is a neat little program for the cold and flu. It works on bacterial or viral protein coatings and a simple list of frequencies. That's one of the shorter lists of programs. Sometimes has the best results. Yeah, you get sinus inflammation, but the viruses. The only person that did blood work on this had Hep C, and something that was for a generalized protocol for viruses seemed to work for the Hep C, brought her numbers down considerably. Go to the next slide. Diet's a consideration with all these. It helps the alkalinity, which is an electrical measurement, and to keep it organic is also very important, because you don't want these man-made chemicals, the benzene and all of this. There's also within each of these protocols usually very specific diet recommendations, which can vary from protocol to protocol, and same with the supplements would vary from protocol to protocol. We'll go to the next slide. MS, different variables. Next slide. Autoimmune disease of the central nervous system, brain, and spinal cord, different causes, and it's one of the longest protocols. There's many flukes. There's multiple. There's mercury in it, and Shigella and nocardia bacteria that are targeted. Usually, these protocols will interact with everyone to a certain extent. So when these things get scanned, usually these diseases will be somewhat existing in a large number of people that might not ever fully develop, especially if you can catch them at a very early stage. Next slide. Yeah, there's myelinated sheaths and damaged myelin sheaths, leaving the neuron open for damage. And I think the mercury and aluminum and some of these other heavy metals, toxic heavy metals, can be very responsible for this, as well as the poisons excreted by certain bacteria. Next slide. these neurites, they can get damaged, and that damages signaling, and helps destroy the brain and open up holes in it. And that's not something you'd want to happen. So, next slide. Biotin, essential fatty acids are absolutely crucial. You want to have the right membrane structure in order to be able to detoxify things in and out of the cells and rebuild, and also pull in the right nutrients. If the fatty acid balance is off, all these other things are off, and it's a keystone to the supplement therapy, in my opinion. But D3, there's specialized membrane complexes. Magnesium orotate is the most tolerable form of magnesium, but some magnesium supplementation is absolutely critical to get any of this stuff to detox out and to rebuild. It's in over 300 different reactions that the body thinks, and over 200, some say 300, and lipothiamine. And it's all accompanies an electronic protocol that goes along with it. So continue to the next slide. And with the nutritional protocols, when the biofeedback is incorporated and someone's already on a good supplement protocol, they might not need, 8 out of the 8 supplements, but they might need, 2, if they already have a good protocol set up. So this is cancer, a lot of different types, and I think one of the most complex scenarios that I see. Go to the next slide, please. Frequency, with the micro steps that I have inserted, there's I think 900 some frequencies in my library to assess for. The pH environment is usually off. There's usually different microorganisms also included. You want to feed the healthy cells and keep the voltage of the healthy cells up as you target the mutated ones, the cancer cells. Next slide. So this is an excellent scenario, and I think it also shows the unclustering of the blood cells, which improves oxygen utilization. And I think this is where, with the oxygen utilization, I think the plasma is a little bit better than the contact, but it depends on the stage, and I think it also depends on the type of the cancer and the nutritional environment of the client. And you can see the fragmentation of these colonies of the red blood cells and the debris therein, which would necessitate the charcoal or some types of binding agents. And this happens pretty quickly, and I've witnessed it a lot before. Fast changes. Although they might be small, the changes can seem to happen pretty rapidly with the electronics. Next slide. Basal thelioma, age 50, 9 5-minute treatments over 6 weeks. Generally, with these any of these protocols, they're almost all meant to be run daily, and this is a lot less than that. But you can see the cells take a voltage and can do some healing with it, which is you can measure with photographs, and if you hit the frequencies quite right, you can get amazing results like this. That's a traditional healing of a scar, which is there's a lot left over. Next slide. Yeah, this is again just 5 treatments, but if you have the right equipment, the right frequencies, you can get things to happen quite fast. There might be draining or some things that happen. Patients without symptoms after the first 5 treatments. Next slide.
I need to add something about this one.
Yeah.
This was an inoperable tumor. It was around the jugular vein. This guy was going to die. This was very early, previous to most of our work that we're doing now. And at this point, rather than contacts, they actually, you can see in the middle picture that they were implanted platinum electrodes and were stimulating it via microcurrent that way. That was the best they had then. Nowadays, we know we could just use a set of electrode pads and accomplish the same thing, probably even better.
Right.
The guy survived just fine.
So would you do one electrode pad on that now and another one's slightly away, or keep both of them on the same
I'd probably
side
do
of the
them
neck?
at both sides of it, or at both ends.
Sure. Right, targeting the condition. Yep.
This was
Next
not
slide.
done in the United States, by the way.
Okay.
You're doing great. Keep going.
Thanks. Next slide, please. Breast cancer. This is one of the better slides to show people. And as a practitioner, you get these slides to work with, and you can see this stuff happening. I've had some problems where someone finds a lump, and I'll give them the protocol, and before they have an X-ray, the lump is not there anymore. So sometimes they don't get the photographs like this if they find it on themselves. If they know they have the cancer, they can get the pictures done, the frequencies can be run, and then you get an nice looking after picture like that. Next slide. Yeah, alkalizing foods. The environment's a problem. It has to be looked at as an environment, and what you put into your body is the biggest thing there. No processed sugars, but there are good healing sugars and glyconutrients in that. And vegetables need to be emphasized, organic, and farmers market, that sort of stuff. So next slide.
Before you go to diabetes, you want to mention the document.
Mention the document, the cancer document. Yeah.
Released this morning.
Yeah, so it's pulsetechresearch.com and the Electric Human
Actually,
section.
we put a copy of it in the I'll go ahead and do this, in the
on the main blog.
In the Quantum Life directory that was mentioned.
Oh, okay.
First three slides. It's holman.net/pub/quantum life with a capital Q and a capital L. And it was broken into two segments. The first being the work, about 30 pages on cancer, and then about 70 pages in a supporting document. And that's free to share with others. The copyrights are already there to do that.
And they're quite thorough as well. I'd say I went through them today.
It's about a 1 week presentation worth. But if you have or know somebody, it's something that really a person needs to look at, and it explains a lot of these things in much more detail, in a very understandable manner.
Yeah, so it's 1 in 3 people die from cancer now. It's replaced heart disease as the biggest cause of death in the U.S., and it'll probably get to 1 in 2, and one to one person, dies of cancer almost. If they live long enough, it seems to be the way things go. And the conventional treatments don't seem to be doing the trick after, what was it, Nixon said in '71 that there's a war on cancer. And these research organizations are only 6 months or 1 year shy of the magic pill that cures every type of cancer, even though they seem to be so varying with conditions. And yeah, it's a fight, and it's a war on the body, and there's other cells that lose besides the cancer cells. And doctors do not have to warn people about the side effects that can be caused by the treatment. It's been ruled in federal court. So I think that those were some of the main points from the cancer document. Diabetes is another, it's a simple one. There's 2 protocols that they came out with it for, diabetes 1, type 1, and type 2, which have different factors at play. Let's go to the next slide, please. So these are the things that diabetes affects, and it can be genetic, it can be diet-induced, and there's been things with diabetes where, starvation in one generation will set off a condition of diabetes in the second generation, and where the body will not regulate insulin correctly. But it affects a whole lot of things. And there's other supportive programs such as neuropathy and things that I think would be thrown in with this protocol other than the 2 diabetes programs. So continue the next one. Next slide, please. Type 1 and type 2, people know what they have, so it's either one program or the other. And I don't think running both would hurt. I think in the case of that, the frequencies just don't catch on anything and no harm's done. So I'll go on to the next one.
This is one solution, and the next slide is still another.
Yeah, this concentrated aloe juice and these rainforest-specific ingredients, and yeah, there's quite a few good diabetic solutions as far as supplements that can go along with the protocols and help things work faster than they would normally.
Both of these seem to be involved with reversal of diabetes, even type 1.
Okay. And next slide. There's 2 protocols. Mercury and detox program needs to be run with the support more than almost any other program that's in the PFG lab from the toxic effects of removing that mercury. Go to the next slide.
That's just simply a suggestion of where you might apply the electrodes.
Right. So you want to, the current's going to flow from one pad to the other, so you try to center it around your problem unless it's interfering with the brain or the heart. So yeah, in the lower coastal arc of the ribs there. Go to the next one. And same with if someone has an arthritic knee, I like to place, an electrode on either side of the knee, or if there's a edema swelling on one place or another, to place the electrodes right there. Lyme disease, everyone's talking about it, and just biting a Lyme doesn't seem to do a whole lot of good for it. There's a lot of frequencies. There's different supplements. Go to the next slide, please. The problems with Lyme is it's hard to diagnose because it excretes over 180 different toxins and masks as many other diseases. It could be MS or lupus and arthritis or Parkinson's. And while those drugs are being given for those other specific diseases, the cause is, not addressed. I heard there was a Canadian study that used antibiotics for arthritis, which can be largely caused by Lyme disease. That's how they found Lyme disease in the first place, is that it caused juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. But it seems to adapt around the antibiotics quite effectively. And it's the hardest. It's probably one of the hardest things to completely get rid of because of how fast it breeds. And consistent monitoring, consistent changing of the frequencies to match the changed Lyme condition, and to work the different channels of the body so you know that you're getting the current to where it needs to go. Next slide, please. Additional biological causes. How did that get there?
I have no idea. It's not supposed to be.
Okay, we'll go to the next one. Okay, well, what else I'd like to say about Lyme is there's four programs for it. The one's about 30 minutes long, and they range to about 2 hours long. The programs and the protocol are just simply rotated if the condition hasn't mutated. Some indications, if you've done other biofeedback or if you've taken antibiotics for a while, the condition is usually mutated to where it's not containing iron in it anymore. It's using up molybdenum. And there's different ways to assess, what frequencies you're on. I have sweeps, where I've got 1,400 frequencies for Lyme in my computer. This is my largest library by far, and for good reason. And there's a lot of different spirochetes that seem to cause Lyme-like diseases. So this is Jimmie and Paul. Tons of research into this stuff, and I look up to them as the best in the industry of building machines and testing, and now even putting out the information. They're all non-medical equipment, and I don't think they will be. And the machines keep on improving, and they don't have to recertify their machines. They can just keep on making them better and better without getting those certifications. Oh, next slide. MRSA, simple program, effective program and protocol. I've seen it work. There's a MRSA testimonial on the YouTube page that I have on Demed Jedi. Plugging in MRSA and Rife should bring you to that. This is also research that they've done, much like the Candida. So next slide. I think these get pretty gruesome. There you go. Yeah, so it's very serious. It's methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which means that it doesn't respond to any drugs, even strong antibiotics. It can be throughout the body. The one case that I've worked with quite a bit says that it feels like there's like an alien in her body, and it's a colony that will sometimes be moving and sometimes stays very still. And I think that's kind of what you're looking at in the microscope. You don't know if it's alive or dead because it can be moving so slowly. But when it attacks, you get situations like this, and sometimes they're internal too, which is you're not seeing it, but you're definitely feeling it. Next slide. I'd say MRSA is it's found almost everywhere. We have constant contact with it, and these situations can and will happen to almost everyone or somebody that you know. And we're in a post antibiotic age where these things are not working for these super bugs.
And you're more likely to get it in a hospital than anywhere else.
Exactly. And some reasons for that is they'll clean one thing and then use the same cleaning apparatus to clean something else, and before long this thing that's adapted itself around any chemical means of destruction has been spread all over. So these are the worst case scenarios of MRSA, and I think they're nearly 100% devitalized by these frequency applications.
All of them recorded devitalization by the lab that was doing the testing. These actually came in from 3 separate labs as their worst case examples. And we were able to hit all 3 of them.
And again, these are Jimmie's frequencies. They're not right frequencies, and they're not codes like some other devices. They're very specific within the hundredths of a hertz at around 46,000 hertz. But next slide. Environmental toxicity. This is where the mercury program can come in, and also the supportive programs. Next slide.
I spoke in Kuwait. That's why these came up. But
Okay.
The problem came up, and then next slide. But when you realize it, this is LA. I don't know which one is the worst, the Kuwait picture or the LA picture.
Yeah.
But the solution
It's hard to determine.
Next slide. It's something we're all having to deal with. And all of us knows this, and it still amounts to the same thing. Next slide. We got to get that stuff out of us. And the method is to release, bind to it, and eliminate.
Right, which is why you take the charcoal, you have the mercury frequencies to release it from wherever it was, and then to eliminate it with proper diet and the organ support and the lymph glands, and there's also lung support with those smog situations. And one of the worst cases I saw came from corn harvesting season. I got a distribution of 14,000, which is the highest marker I've ever seen. That GMO corn getting cut, and the dust that arose from it seemed to be about, a pretty nice environment for creating sickness. It can be restored with frequencies, the right supplements, the right diet. Next slide.
Okay, this is about where I take over, isn't it?
Great.
Next slide. These are some of the things we'll go through real quick. Next slide. Next slide. A lot of this work started as a result of one of my guys having a terrible car wreck and a traumatic brain injury. Next slide. With a lot of work, this is the same guy. He had basically no chance of living, and if he lived, it was going to be pretty grim. But he's doing great. He's my main assistant now. You probably saw him in the first couple of pictures doing a lot of the sessions. Next slide. But from him, when one of the main things was getting, in his case, it was repair of the brain, but in some of the same things that had to do with the swelling caused from a lot of the contaminants. And when we looked at his protocol, we realized this thing had enormous benefit in other areas, such as autism. Next slide. This was a boy, there's a video, but it's not available right now. He has seizures multiple times a week. And after getting a lot of that detoxified out of his brain, next slide, he went from bedridden and not being able to talk and fully autistic, actually very autistic, to pretty much a normal life. I understand he's actually in school, finishing school and college now. Next slide. The same protocol was also tried on Alzheimer's. So if you recall the mercury issue that was probably the traumatic event to his brain, to the autistic brain, in the Alzheimer's, it's believed that aluminum is the contributing contaminant. But if you go next slide, you find that it's still the same solution. Release that thing, bind to it, and eliminate it, and give energetic restoration and rebuilding with the proper supplementation. Next slide. This brought me into a whole new area, and that was of the electropollution. Next slide. We have it all around us. Every one of us is being exposed to it. Next slide. But the Schumann resonance, that's when I realized all this electropollution in itself was bad, but it was preventing us from seeing the Schumann resonance. This guy named Schumann realized that these lightning strikes that are occurring all over the Earth cause the Earth to ring. It's these certain frequencies that I have shown here. Next slide. And it wasn't until right after they were validated they realized they'd already been doing early brainwave work. They realized those frequencies matched up almost perfectly with known brainwave peaks. And these are all key places where our brain does certain things. Next slide. But getting control over those things and those interrupted, sleep was one of the big things when it came to brain. But now let's start getting into other areas of the brain, because understanding that relationship between the vibration of the Earth and the frequency of the Earth and the frequency of the brain becomes a real key. Let's go next slide, next slide, next slide, and then the next one. The entrainment is very important to understand, and it was first done in the 1600s when who's now considered a physicist was a guy named Christian Huygens, was also a clockmaker, and he had a clock on a wall, and he would notice the clocks would synchronize, the pendulum swings would synchronize with each other over time. That's called entrainment. Well, that's what our brain has done also. If you look back at that slide that had compared the earth resonances with our brain resonances, we'll see it's one and the same, and that's apparently what's going on. Most of the brainwave work, next slide, we can use that same principle to do certain things to bring ourselves to certain brainwave states. Typically, the way this is done, and you know the Monroe Institute does it with the hemisync technology. There's a binaural beat. There's actually another name for it. But because these frequencies
I think it's another destruction of frequencies.
The what?
I think it's another way of saying destruction of frequencies, because you get the 217 minus the 210, and you get a 7 hertz difference. And so
yeah, that wasn't the name. But anyway, it's the same thing. The reason it is done is because you typically don't have any electronic method to get these lower frequencies, so they have to rely on your brain mixing the differences in the two, with one signal going in one ear, another going in another ear, and your brain mixes the two, gets the difference, and comes up with this 7 hertz, which isn't really there, but it is in the mixing. It becomes there in your brain, and like that clock pendulum swings, and you try to match up to it, and your brain tries to follow and go to whatever frequency it is, whether it be a higher frequency or a lower frequency. Next slide. We have these things broken into several different areas. The delta, these are in pretty much order from low to high. Most of us, when we're in a nice relaxed state, are in that alpha. Beta is nice, is where most of us live during the day. Some of us, like me right now, I'm probably in that gamma where I'm having to stay really focused on something. But theta is a nice unconscious state of sleep, and delta is where a few of us get to because of all the electropollution. That's where a lot of the restorative sleep and things go on, but we just kind of lack that nowadays. Next slide. We're going to go through these next ones pretty quick. These just show the various areas, the frequency, and kind of what you're doing. Next slide. That's gamma. Beta is higher than most of us are, except when we're really focused. Next slide. That's a great way to meditate, and I think most of the quantum life stuff tries to work in this area. It's where you begin focusing. Typically, you have to train yourself to get to this area and remain conscious. Next slide. This is a state that is really interests me because it's an area where you're not normally conscious, but it's where a lot of stuff can really go on well. This is where we're wanting to work a lot. Next slide. This is where we would need to be for a lot of our healing and our resetting of our clocks. This is the place we're being deprived of. Next slide. That's the other thing. Most of the Rife stuff has been involved heavily with square waves. Almost everything we're doing here is involved with sine waves. And that's very important. Next slide. One of the things is when most of our stuff works with electrode pads, you never want to put electrode pads on your head. That's just an if. I constantly tell people no, no, no. There's equipment that is good for that, but it is very, very low voltage. Some of the things that can come out of iPhones, that's a low enough voltage that it can be tolerated, but not this, not our equipment. It has much higher capabilities and could do more damage if you didn't pay attention. Next slide. In some of these points, we are looking to use these things as gateway points. Let's see. Yeah, a couple more slides. And this, we're looking at where certain things happen. We want to get to these points. Next slide. And even next slide, that one's going to be too complicated. But to use the entrainment feature to walk ourselves down to wherever we want to be and then get off on that floor, so to speak. Even if it's below a conscious state, you can walk yourself down slowly, and if the signal is still being given there, it'll take you down to that step and hold you there until it shuts off. At least that's the way this is being planned. Next slide. Next slide. And this is basically the equipment that we're doing it with. It's been released. We released it overseas. We're working with a company over there that it's incorporating it into a pretty elaborate piece of software. But it's got a lot of interest for. Also, you'll see our equipment here rebranded with Mideastern. This is being done in the Mideast. Next slide. These are various areas that we've already developed the protocols, the walking down the steps to stop at specific areas where these particular things occur. These actually occur at known frequencies. And so we've already developed these protocols. Next slide. This is an area that is actually pretty new to me. I I've never been into yoga or these disciplines, but I'm getting educated real quick. Next slide. And then the next slide. I'm getting into the personal development. The various chakras have very specific frequencies. Now, these are relatively low frequencies, and they are in the audio region. And a person should be able to synchronize and balance these signals. But like I say, I'm still learning quite a bit about it. Next slide. One of the things that we're really interested in right now is molecular emulation. Next slide. We have been working with some pretty interesting drugs and molecules to emulate these certain molecules, because most of them are very difficult to obtain. Difficult, if not illegal, in some places. And we're actually capturing the molecular signature so that it can be reapplied at one of these particular brainwave states. We've identified, seems like it's the best place to insert this information is when the person is in that particular state. And so that the body actually thinks the molecule is there. Next slide. The sample that you saw on the counter there was a anti-cancer drug. Next slide. It was a drug that actually it was not a drug. It's although the FDA is trying to treat it as a drug now. It had a 94% cure rate. It was actually going through clinical trials, and it was very cheap, like $12 a dose. FDA couldn't have that, or the cancer clinics couldn't have that. Another drug or compound, next slide, is a remarkable drug. This is being done in Russia. And it actually rebuilds the telomeres on the ends of the DNA. It's not just an anti-aging thing, it's an aging reversal compound. Next slide. But it is also for helping decalcify and restore the pineal gland for various mind work. Next slide. We've also looked at dimethyltryptamine that people also look at as the God molecule. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would be interested in that, should it come to that. But this is some of the exciting research that we're doing, and it's one of the things that keeps me going. Next slide. But all in all, when you put all these things together, it really amounts to life extension and helping us be who we ultimately want to be. Next slide. We've done the work for all of the protocols. It all really boils down to the same thing, is regeneration to boost all the processes that are supposed to be occurring, and to give us all the nutrients that we need. Next slide. And get that aging reversal down. Get us where we want to be. This isn't all about 6 people. I'm excited about things. I'm really pleased to see that there's so much interest out there, and that there's practitioners out there that have the same goals that we do. That's about it.
That's pretty awesome. Thank you, Jimmie, and thank you, Jordan. That's wonderful information. And we do have some questions that came in. So I'm going to start with the first one. Is there a plan for Pulse Technologies to build a smart frequency device that integrates the idea of a cytoscan directly into the frequency delivery device?
Yes, and I'm leaving in a little over a week to go overseas to meet and discuss that very thing with some of the other companies that are involved in that project.
Very interesting. Okay.
It's a multinational. I'm the only American company that's involved in it. All the others are Russian and Mideastern, and some of the other countries where they have some pretty good disciplines that, like acupuncture, things like that, where the stuff is much better accepted.
Okay.
The technologies are fitting together very nicely.
Beautiful. Okay. Can you use the quantum life infinity device to find frequencies to then run in the Pulse Technologies device?
I don't know. I haven't had enough time to spend on the quantum life, their software, but I know it's a continually developing project itself, and I know that's kind of the direction that they want to go with it. I don't know what the sensing capabilities are on it, or the identifications. Right after I got my copy installed and was looking at it, I got absolutely slammed with about 4 different presentations that had to be done. So I didn't get into it as much as I would have liked to. I still plan on looking at it a lot more in the future. But it holds one of the gaps of the parts that we can't do as a manufacturer of a application device. We're kind of limited. We can't do for lack of a better word, the diagnostic or the assessment device. We need to work with partners to do that. And most of the other companies that have diagnostic devices, such as a lot of the Russian devices, they have very little to no application, for lack of a better word, treatment abilities. So, and I honestly can say I don't understand a lot of the systems that they're going through to come up with the measurements that they come up with, that are come up with. But I hope to, over the next year, find out a lot more about that.
Okay.
Maybe have a better answer next time.
So it says, last week I raised the question about having a pulsed technologies device that had uncomfortable shocks. Jimmie said they would make good on it, and I'm happy to report they have. I sent my device back, and the new device is on its way. Thank you for the great service.
Oh, that's what we do. It came in a couple of days after that. It came in late in the day, too late to get it done and back out via FedEx, but it went out FedEx the very next morning.
That's fabulous. Okay, so where does one find the protocols that are being discussed? Are they in the Pulse Technology software to be readily selected, or are they found elsewhere?
It depends on which ones we're talking about. Most of these that we talk about, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of them that are in there as samples, but they're the public ones. Most of the ones we talk about here are ones that we spent quite a few years on, and most of those are given out or through the practitioner. For a manufacturer to give these out is in the United States is not particularly legitimate. Now Paul, on the other hand, the Pulse Tech Romania, they don't operate under the same rules, so there's a little bit more freedom there. Those aren't in there, but they're easily imported. We make them available through the practitioners, which we really like. Jordy has them all, Jordy often gets them much in advance of them actually being released because they need to work with the clients, see how well they work.
Well, they work well.
I think we're getting that. Okay, is there one PDF for the electric human, or do you have to download several different files?
Well, I'll let you in a secret. You actually have to download quite a few files, but the cancer document that I talked about, the second segment of it is the majority of the documents that are in Chapter 3, which I assume is the large bulk of what she was talking about, the separate documents. I combined all the question and answer documents and all the consideration documents into one PDF, and it is the supplement for the cancer document. So even if you're not interested in the cancer, I'd grab that cancer supplement and save yourself the time of downloading all the others. We probably will be doing a composite document sooner or later, but we're still putting a lot of new information up.
Okay. I see mention of the LYME protocol, but I don't see that listed under Section 3 of the electric human. Where do
That's
I
because
find more?
we're working on that one right now, and it's going to be a document just about the same size as the 30-page cancer document.
Okay.
I had to get the cancer one out first, but the LYME one is now highest on our priority.
Okay. So last week, Mr. Holman was speaking about the square wave and sine wave. My question is, which wave is best to use in the Infinity app when balancing harmonics or solitron? Jordy, can you answer that one?
Well, if you're trying to reach higher harmonics, the answer is square wave. If you know that you're trying to run like the exact frequencies, say like with the brainwave stuff, or the solfeggio frequencies, the 528, 417, etc., then sine wave's more appropriate.
Interesting. Okay. So depending upon what you're running, you go back and forth.
Right. So if you know the frequency that you want to run and it's not involving any higher harmonics, not destructive work, then sine wave. But if you're trying to reach higher frequencies than the rate that you're plugging in, then square wave would be more ideal.
Okay. Did DeJonge say some of your devices work without tethering so one can get up to move around?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a pulsed LED. There's the 3 plasma units and 3 plasma. There's a P3, P3 Plus. There's the P3 Pro. Jimmie had the kit plasma that was being sold that you could buy in addition to be run off of the PFG2Z. So yeah, all those devices they're radiant, and you can walk around better with the plasmas because they tie in with gravitational fields as well as light. But with the pulsed LED, you need to be within like a 10-foot range.
Got it.
So you're going to be tethered to all of them within 70 feet or within 10 feet, something like that.
Okay, that's nice to know. Okay, so what we have now is we have thank yous, we have love you guys. Okay, this is very interesting. Thank you, Jimmie. You've done a great job. Very intriguing. So grateful. Thank you. I mean, this just goes on and on.
Okay.
Excuse me. So I think this brings us to our conclusion this evening, and this has been very, very impressive. And I want to thank you both for your time and participation with us in Quantum Life and informing us of really some spectacular technology that I think can work in harmony with what we already have. So, you were going to say something?
See, it was a real pleasure being here. I've enjoyed doing it, and I hope people want to go ahead and download this and review it at their convenience and share it with others.
Okay.
We're happy to answer any questions anytime.
Okay, one last question came in. What is the address for the cancer document?
If you go to can you go back to the second or third slide?
I can here in a second. Third slide. 1, 2, third slide?
Yep, or fourth one. They're both there.
Okay.
We have them on our website, but we've put them here specially because I think it would be easier to grab. You don't have to look through anything.
Okay, so there it
There's
is. There's
2 cancer documents, and they're both there, and the majority of that Chapter 3 is also there.
Okay, and how do people reach you, Jimmie?
Through Pulse Technologies, or Jimmie, Jimmie, at pulsedtech, pulsedtech.com, or the number is 214-453-0095.
Beautiful. Thank you.
And they can usually track me down wherever I am.
Okay.
And I can be anywhere.
I believe that. Okay. And Jordan, I understand, excuse me, that you are making yourself available to people, to our community, for consulting with you or having sessions with you. And it's my understanding that you charge $100 an hour, and that they will receive a frequency list. Did I understand that correctly? Jordan, did we lose you?
Yes. Yeah. No, you didn't lose me. Yeah. Usually the consults are 50 or 100 or whatever people think it's worth. And if it's all right, with Jimmie, I wouldn't mind having people, try different rates. But I see the Quantum Life app being able to maybe duplicate some of this stuff, but having a hard time duplicating all that the PFG does, or for some of the specific programs or pathogens, it is going to be very difficult.
Okay.
But to use it maybe as an assessment device, depending on if it works like the Zyto, then I could see it working as an assessment device.
Okay.
The same.
All right. And how do they reach you?
I like people to go through my email first, which is Jordan, JORDAN, DEJONGE at hotmail.com, Jordan DeJonge at hotmail.com, and kind of brief me with the questions there and leave me a phone number. I'd like to call them back from there.
Okay, perfect. Well, unfortunately, I wish this could go on for another 2 hours, but our time is up. So thank you, gentlemen, for your attention here and your education, and we appreciate you very much. There are more people coming in saying, so grateful, thank you, appreciate you, and on and on. So thank you.
It was great.
Yes, it was great. I loved every minute of it, and so did everybody else.
Well, thanks for having us.
It's our great pleasure.
Yep.
Karen Williams, great pleasure. We're all on the same page. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye for now.